There are many mysteries that have become a staple in Deltarune's community. Long-running questions that, for years, have gone without an answer. Who is the Roaring Knight, and why have they chosen to begin opening up dark fountains despite the clear dangers to both the light and dark worlds? How did Chris end up having their soul under the control of the player, and why are there implications that demon rituals might have been involved? Who is W.D. Gaster? And why, after nearly a decade, do we still know so little about a character that has now become integral to discussing Deltarune, to the point where we still can't be 100% sure that his most accepted appearance is what he actually looks like? All of these have been discussed in great detail by different members of the community, each with their own interpretations and opinions of how things are going to go down. For only having 2 of the 7 puzzle pieces set in place on the metaphorical table, it's genuinely impressive just how much the community has been able to theorize, analyze, philosophize, and predict. One of the most intriguing things to me, though, is our relationship with the meta-narrative of the game itself. Our real life has occasionally influenced parts of the story, and in many ways, Deltarune holds a conversation with its predecessor. From the fairly inconsequential, like a handful of jokes relying on a player's prior knowledge of Undertale, to the far more substantial, with years of foreshadowing finally having a payoff between games. All of this has been talked about at great length before. You probably already know all of this if you're deep enough in the Deltarune rabbit hole to have clicked onto this very video. And while that's absolutely more than fine, given that we as a whole thrive off of each other's efforts, the topic that I'd like to discuss today is something that hasn't been mentioned much in the wider fandom. You see, in a small corner of the Deltarune community, there exists an intersection of people who are both fans of the game and a property far more ancient, controversial, genre-defining. One could even say it's capricious. We remember our roots, even though the fandom as a majority politely ignores it, with those who skew on the younger side likely not knowing of our relationship together whatsoever. Homestuck. I'm talking about Homestuck. Like it or not, it's steeped into the very core of both Undertale and Deltarune. Toby Fox working on Undertale while living in Andrew Hussy's basement is practically an in-joke for Homestucks. And while it's interesting to see how these games have been able to almost entirely step out of this absolutely monolithic webcomic shadow, if you want to do a deep dive on specific portions of either of these games, especially the music, Homestuck is like an itch in the back of your head that you'll never be fully able to ignore. And what's one of the things that a small section of this side of the fandom has noticed about Deltarune? It has a fascinating relationship with the impalpable Homestuck track, Penumbra Phantasm. For some of you, just the mention of that name is like a sleeper agent hearing their activation phrase. For others, you probably felt it again, that itch at the back of your head. Most people watching this will have no idea what I'm talking about, but if you're lucky, you may have heard a couple of Deltarune theorists jokingly name-dropping it in their videos. This is rare at best. You could have also seen someone excitedly talking about it in very specific comment sections, but you're likely to have just brushed it off as in-joke fandom bullshit and moved on with your day. And I don't blame you. Normal people probably would have moved on. Maybe you even should. But I got that itch. I didn't move on. Why didn't I move on? But I kid you not when I say I've been obsessed with researching this topic for months. If you're like me, then this might even affect your relationship with Undertale. Want to learn about how much of a big deal this is? Then sit tight, because after today, you're going to understand exactly why people have had their eyes on this since before Chapter 1 even dropped. Part 1. Who's this douchebag? Meow. Let's start with a little history lesson.
Hello, everybody! Let me tell you about Homestuck.
Homestuck is a webcomic made by Andrew Hussie that began on April 13th, 2009, and lasted until that same date in 2016. It's the story of 4 friends and the game they play together. The impact has lasting effects on not just their world, but worlds beyond it. Its reach cannot be overstated. Homestuck was genre-defining. While there are things about it that certainly date it, and many would rightfully say these aspects are better left in the past, we have never seen anything quite like it before, and might never see anything like it again, especially in the way it would mix mediums for the sake of its storytelling. It is the perfectly imperfect modern creation myth, where the existence of time travel was introduced as a joke, only to have an important grasp over the rest of the comic. But Betty Crocker being a tyrannical extraterrestrial overlord who took over Earth by running for the US presidency and had ICP become her co-vice presidents is taken deathly seriously. If you're still interested in learning more after this video, I'd recommend looking at Crimson Ruse's Let Me Tell You About Homestuck livestream. Regardless, Toby Fox worked as a member of the music team for this comic, and the atmosphere was something I can comfortably describe as fuck around and find out. People who submitted songs to use in the comic did it with the understanding that Hussie would and could use them for pretty much whatever. Submitters were rarely ever told about upcoming plot elements, and Hussie would even rework details in flash pages to better fit the songs they wanted to use. A notable example being that a song explicitly made for Dave was something they decided would work far better in a scene with Dirk. Music team members also riffed off of each other a lot. Remixes of remixes of remixes weren't unheard of. Now, Toby was absolutely not the sole composer for Homestuck, but his contributions were massive, many of them having a lasting effect on the comic. The main song used in Collide, the climactic end battle of Homestuck, is literally called Opa Toby style. There's even a visual reference to Undertale at one point in The Flash. You'd be hard-pressed to find any Homestuck fan who doesn't know what Savior of the Waking World is. Rightfully considered by many to be the turning point of early Homestuck, it's referenced many, many times in later Flash pages. Toby went off with this one. But Savior of the Waking World wasn't the first time Toby used this motif. This is. What you're listening to right now is the piano version of the song Penumbra Phantasm. The specific version was found by Tyrant Bacon and Cozied, and while incomplete, it is still, to this day, the most intact incarnation of Penumbra that we know of. That's a strange word to use for a song, right? Incarnation. But Penumbra has a long history behind it, with its first creation in 2010 and the version most people familiar with written at some point in 2011 or 12. It was unearthed in very early 2017, before quietly being buried once again at Toby's own request. It has influenced many tracks in Homestuck, such as Get Up, Descend, Savior, Eternity Serve, Course, Toby Style, Ascend. But somehow, despite being arguably the second most influential song in the entirety of Homestuck, the first of course being Doctor by Bazinkai, we've never actually gotten a full or official release. Back in 2011, Toby stated that he wasn't entirely happy with it and it didn't meet his standards of quality at the time, much like we'd see with later songs that he would eventually reintroduce to the public through the Deltarune newsletter. Despite this, he continued to revisit Penumbra, referencing it in some ways and tweaking it in others. And again in 2011, Toby Fox had a fever dream that, according to him, was what would eventually be the ending of Deltarune. This is the year that he started wanting to make a game. What happens in August 2011? When asked about Penumbra Phantasm on his Tumblr account, Toby would only answer with this statement.
At Shadow's Edge, shatter the twilight reverie.
What's the first tweet that Toby ever made on his Twitter account? In July of that same year? one that many people point to when talking about how long he's been planning Deltarune for, the edge of the shadow, where reality and dream meet. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty damn connected to me. I know what you're thinking. Mr. Maximilian, are you really making the argument that an unreleased Homestuck song is meant to be a Deltarune track? Oh, absolutely. And I'm about to go into too much detail why. But to start off, do you know what the definition of penumbra is? A partial shadow, as in an eclipse between regions of complete shadow and complete illumination. Or, in other words, something that's in between the dark and light. What's the plot of Deltarune? A game that requires characters to navigate between worlds. One's quite literally called the Dark and Light world. It certainly sounds quite penumbral, doesn't it? And if you're wondering, to define a phantasm is something apparently seen but having no physical reality. A phantom or an apparition. This is referring to the song itself, something that we've seen, that we've heard, but for all intents and purposes isn't real. It's been an in-joke for Penumbra enthusiasts for years that this song doesn't even exist. Hell, I even have the perfect example for you. In 2011, the digital album for Homestuck Volume 8 was released with 37 main songs and 5 bonus ones, the very last one being Null. Literally, the entire song was nearly silent with no album art to speak of. And since it was a digital exclusive download, Null was mostly written off as a dumb little prank Toby was playing on people. Until someone discovered that if you reversed and amplified Null, it played a very brief and previously unheard of snippet of Penumbra. Even back then, Toby was a notorious troll, and he's been playing this game for a very, very long time. So, we have an old, unfinished, and unused song that's very name not only refers to its nature in our world, but its special relationship with both light and darkness. And, even if all of this was circumstantial, would you like to know something that's referenced in several Deltarune tracks? Would you? Well, surprise, it's Penumbra Phantasm! Part 2. The music section. Or, my slow descent into madness. Before I show my proof to this claim, it's important to clear up one thing off the bat. When talking about Penumbra Phantasm, you need to know that part of it references Doctor by Bazinkai, that other massively influential Homestuck song. As such, when people say something references Penumbra, or to put it more simply, uses one of its main leitmotifs, they're usually either talking about this part of the song, or this one. Not Doctor.
Or at least they should be, but we'll get to that later.
However, Toby is an extremely talented and resourceful composer, and as it turns out, many parts of Penumbra have appeared in Toby's work over the years, not just its main sections. To make this simple, I'm mainly going to be using a piano version of Penumbra to make comparisons, but I'd encourage you to explore the similarities between the other versions in your free time. Just make sure that you're not accidentally looking at a cover version that somebody's already made for Deltarune. When I'm not using the specific version of Penumbra that's available in the Homestuck sound test, I'll make a note of it. And look, while I am very much not a music guy, I am a patterns recognition guy. I'm sure that if someone like me, who has very little of an ear for music, can find comparisons like this, then there is going to be someone who can track down much more. This next section is absolutely not meant to be a definitive list, given the just lack of documentation on the subject. Think of this more like a jumping off point. The criteria for the comparisons is thus. Is the Penumbra section easy to hear or hard to hear? It doesn't matter if it's a leitmotif, a main melody, or just a motif for the purposes of today's discussion. If it is recognizable as starting from Penumbra, then they are similar in a definable way. Basically, does it pass the ear test, or can the similarities be easily explained? I am going to reiterate this. I am in no way a music expert. I am not Andrew Cunningham with his half a bachelor's degree in music, and I certainly do not have his ability to create a Deltarune motif comparison apparatus 666 billion. Though, while we're here, I would strongly encourage you to watch his Everything About Caster's motif video. It was what made me realize that if I didn't make a Penumbra video, then who would? While I have had several people cross-reference this portion of the video just to be entirely sure that I don't have Penumbra Phantasm brain worms destroying my ability to listen to music. Seriously, I could sit here and try to convince you that Penumbra Phantasm has similarities with fucking Paralyzer. But I'm trying to make sure that people can take me even a modicum seriously today. At the end of the day, I wholeheartedly encourage that someone way smarter and more well-versed than me in this area feel free to make their own comparisons. Especially if and when we get more songs that set off alarm bells in later chapters. Or better yet, reach out and invite me along. Collaboration is a wonderful tool. Alright, Penumbra Phantasm is primarily referenced in Toby's work through different leitmotifs. For anybody who needs a quick refresher, a leitmotif is basically a repeating piece of music that's associated with a very particular thing, be it a character, a location, an item, or even just a metaphor. The best example I can use here is how Asgore's boss music directly references Toriel's, thus connecting these two moments and therefore these two characters together musically. If she's your girl, then why does her leitmotif appear in part of my battle theme? Now, without further ado, welcome to the music section. Let's start with an easy one. For anyone that needs a reminder, that's the main section of The Holy, a short but very important track in Deltarune that specifically plays whenever the party is about to close a dark fountain. I'd be extremely surprised if this was an accident. And through The Holy, this includes any song that references it, like Before the Story. If it's a little difficult for you to hear it, try focusing only on the fluttery
B part.
We also get this leitmotif in The Fountain, which is a currently unused song that Toby has stated he wants to use somewhere in the game specifically to introduce a new leitmotif. However, it is my duty to inform that that new leitmotif is more likely to be something that connects to Noelle, but it's still interesting to note. He's going to try to sneak this song in somewhere. I'd also be remiss not to include Fountain in this video because it was specifically the thing that finally introduced me to Penumbra Phantasm, but that's a story for a later day. The meat and potatoes of Penumbra Phantasm showing up in Deltarune is actually this snippet here. We can recognize this in the legend's B part, or the latter half, something strongly associated with both the actual Deltarune, and therefore the main objective of the game, and Ralsei himself. I'd even make the argument that the main section of the legend is derivative of this same part of Penumbra. If this is the case, this is important because it directly ties Ralsei to Penumbra twice over. Ralsei even ends up singing it in one of his acts. It's a rather fitting choice to quote Penumbra here. The legend is about a collision between these two worlds, and we hear it again in My Castle Town, which associates a strengthening relationship between Lighteners and Darkners. Through through here, we can pretty much make the same claim for any song that shares the Legends leitmotif. Empty Town, Chaos King, Birdly, for some reason. And we're gonna have to put a pin in this to keep in mind for later. Out of any Deltarune leitmotif that we can trace back to Penumbra, it's the one you want to watch out for. Moving on.
Let's look at the door.
This next song is one I've never seen analyzed in Penumbra discussions, so I'm pretty comfortable making the claim that this is a, albeit accidental, personal discovery. This one was a bit tricky to pin down at first. Notice that not only is this just a significantly slowed down portion of Penumbra in the song's B part, but the A part is literally the first 4 notes of Penumbra Phantasm, or Doctor if we want to be pedantic, in a different key. This is pretty telling to me. The door has only played once so far in the game, all the way back in Chapter 1 when Chris and Susie were first entering the closet. This doesn't play when they're entering the Dark World, nor when they're exiting the light, but when standing in the very precipice. It's the most penumbral part of the entire game in every sense of the word, not just narratively, but musically. And realizing this was one of the most rewarding parts of making this video. The door is, in every sense of the word, nothing but Penumbra Phantasm. Very resourceful. But okay, maybe that's not compelling enough for you. Where's the controversy? The stakes? Where's that narrative curveball that's worthy of this being the most important Deltarune song? Where's that hot take that's gonna get a bajillion clicks and also people telling me that I'm a crazy person? And to play devil's advocate, I can somewhat understand this line of thinking. We can point to places where parts of the song appear in the game, but does that even matter? Several songs that Toby's made in the past, like Nightmare Night and You Know What This Is, are referenced in Deltarune. That doesn't mean that Toby's doing a long con for them. Isn't this all a little safe? Oh, you poor sweet viewer. I don't just believe I know where Penumbra is going to appear. I think I know who this song is for. Listen closely. Waiter, what's Penumbra Phantasm doing in my freedom theme?
Part 2.5. Let's take the train to Clown Town. This is likely to be my most controversial claim in the entire video, mostly because what I'm about to say is seen as a literal joke for most people in the know, so I want you to take this next part with a grain of salt. Remember that pin I placed earlier?
Out of any Deltarune leitmotif that we can trace back to Penumbra, it's the one you want to watch out for.
We know that Toby is intentional with his boss themes. Hopes and Dreams is something that is baked into the very foundation of the game, to the point where you can trace it back to the beginning of Undertale. We're starting to see this already with the secret bosses, where they're not only connected through circumstance, but through their songs. While I wasn't able to find Penumbra anywhere in the World Revolving or Big Shot, you cannot say the same for the Circus or Dial Tone. Once is an accident. Twice is a coincidence. If this happens in Chapter 3, that's a pattern.
Okay, off script for a very second. It's really fucking interesting that Penumbra Phantasm definitely does appear in the Circus, specifically because you can tie it back to the Chase, which is basically just the door but given a lot more tension, and as we all know, the door is just 4 fucking notes of Penumbra Phantasm playing over and over and over and over and over again. It's interesting that Toby chose to use this precursor song that happens right before the boss fight, both of which have the Freedom theme in them. I don't know, it's just interesting. It's just really, really interesting. It's just so interesting that he chose to do that.
Who is probably the character that's been foreshadowed as the entity who caused Spamton and Jevils' insanity. Who has been probably contacting us on Twitter before the official releases of each chapter. Who has been probably tracking Chris and the player's own game data through not just surveys and vessel creations, but the goddamn file menu, and would not only benefit from, but actively encourage the shattering of
Whatever the hell a Twilight Reverie is.
at Shadow's Edge after being scattered throughout time and space. I can think of none other than W.D. Gaster. We can observe Gaster's theme being more than present in the Freedom theme, which is already enough to set off alarm bells in terms of his influence. But I think we're not looking deep enough. I think that Toby's playing the long game here, establishing parts of Penumbra Phantasm throughout the game, and especially in the case of the secret bosses, building up more and more over 7 long chapters until it merges with the Freedom theme, culminating into a beautiful, chaotic, climactic end. An end finally fitting of a song that's been foreshadowed over not just the course of Deltarune, but of a song worthy of a character that's been just out of reach for nearly a decade, and a bookend to one of the most pervasive examples of Homestuck lost media. How do I know? Because it won't be the first time Toby's done this. That's once upon a time. I'm going to repeat this for you. That's once upon a time. The first notes you hear in Deltarune, the first notes you ever hear in Undertale. I don't even know what else to say here. What else I can say here. It's already being played out before our very eyes. If Penumbra doesn't end up being Gaster's boss theme, then I can only think of one other place it might be appropriate. Every YouTuber is entitled to cash in a ticket for one ridiculously involved Deltarune theory, and this is mine. I am claiming with my whole chest that Penumbra Phantasm's already massive influence in the Undertale and Deltarune series is going to culminate at a significant moment in this story. And I'm staking my bet now that that moment is going to be W.D. Gaster's long-awaited boss fight. And hey, we'll find out soon enough. After all, it's rude to talk about someone who's listening. Part 3. The debunking section. There's been a good few arguments over the years against Toby using Penumbra Phantasm in Deltarune. And while I may be getting to the point of being needlessly thorough, you've just been spending the last 30 minutes listening to a guy talk about how not just an unreleased Homestuck song, but the unreleased Homestuck song has snuck its way into the most influential indie video game series of the past decade. We're far past the point of no return, baby. Let's do this thing. Claim 1. Toby wouldn't reuse a song that was extremely important to Homestuck's history in his own projects. I think this one is the most easily disproved and also simultaneously one of the silliest claims I've seen across the internet. And this is for several reasons. Remember again that Megalovania has not only had a place in Homestuck, but it was also in a pretty important Flash both narratively and for character reasons. It's considered to be Aradia's theme, and I've even seen some people argue that it's also a part of Vriska's. Toby didn't seem to have a problem putting a beloved Homestuck track in the most climactic fight in Undertale, so I don't see why he wouldn't do the same for Deltarune. And while we don't have any other example to that magnitude in Deltarune yet, there's already an entire unused Homestuck song in this game that we've known about since Chapter 1, April 2012. Shout out to my mutual who pointed this out to me and also asked to remain anonymous. You're a real one. Also, fun fact, this is the first recorded case of what would eventually become the song Sans, right here. Toby's got an observable history of doing this before, and he's likely to do it again. Keep this point in mind because we'll be coming back to it. Claim 2. This doesn't sound like it would work in Deltarune. Maybe not solely played on the piano, sure, but if we take a listen to that track Null that I talked about earlier in the video, yeah, that fucks. This is the shortest section of the entire video. You are welcome. Claim 3. Toby wouldn't, or can't, use Penumbra Phantasm in full in Deltarune because it has Doctor in it. This is true in that Penumbra Phantasm does contain Doctor and is built around it. And the argument is that since Toby didn't make Doctor, he'd have to either fully rewrite Penumbra, effectively doctoring Doctor from the piece, or just not include it in Deltarune at all. And I would agree with this if Toby hadn't already used Doctor in Undertale several times over. We see it in Core and in Medium, Althes's themes. Which I find especially cute since her design intentionally references one John Egbert, Doctor being one of his themes, and very sneakily inserted into Hopes and Dreams. Yeah, there was a reason why I talked about Hopes and Dreams earlier. Also, during the editing phase for this video, I found out that Toby is a sneaky bastard because
And I want to be clear here that this is very much Doctor. Penumbra was written years after it was, specifically at first to be a remix of the piece. Doctor was and always will be what came first, and I don't want anyone to misconstrue that. If you're going to make a claim like this on the internet, where I can see it, where other people can see it, at least have some sort of a source to back it up. Let's add in the multiple times that Toby has snuck in Homestuck leitmotifs, including Savior of the Waking World, which I will remind you originated from Penumbra into mainline Pokemon games.
Even after being caught referencing his Homestuck Mpreg rock opera, The Baby Is You in Sword and Shield. To put it mildly, I do not think that this man has any embarrassment or shame towards referencing his old works, or the work he was involved in, except for the Halloween hack, and his old username, but I digress.
While I am more than aware that Toby is more than skilled enough to rewrite Penumbra without any part of Doctor in it, I've gotten attached to the structure of this song. I hope that if we ever get to listen to the whole thing, if that's Toby's intention for Deltarune, we get to have every part of it. It would be an amazing tribute to Bazinkai and her impact, and I'm sure if anyone wants a full Penumbra, it would be Toby Fox. And given that he's already referenced Doctor in Deltarune, I think that this isn't really an appropriate discussion for us to really be having. I don't really know how to move on from this section other to say that she made a lot of important contributions to the musical canon in Homestuck, and she is very greatly missed. Claim 4. You shouldn't even be making this video. It's going to ruin Penumbra Phantasm for all the people who knew about it already by making it less special. In some ways, I do worry that this video is going to ruin some of the magic of this song by getting more eyes on it. The last time it was really publicly talked about, even in the Homestuck fandom, was back in 2019, which, while writing this, I realized was 5 years ago now. And that was when James Roach included a small and newly composed snippet of Penumbra Phantasm into Pester Quest, which, for the uninitiated, is basically a visual novel exploring some alternate universe what-ifs of the webcomic via a plot deviation of the video game Suburb never getting delivered to John's mailbox. And I acknowledge that most of you watching this video probably have no idea what a Suburb is. God! By being able to naturally find it on your own, I'm sure it made a lot of people feel like they really found something special. Something they weren't supposed to see. It certainly felt that way for me. But I was never able to shake off this particular feeling whenever I listened to it. That itch in the back of my head. One that, as time went on, proved impossible to ignore. Why haven't more people been able to listen to this song? Have we as a community failed in some way by keeping this information to ourselves? The sentiment of hoarding Penumbra isn't extremely popular, thankfully, but it does make me wonder how much of a disservice we're doing by not talking about it. If the information is already out there, but no one knows enough, or, God forbid, doesn't care enough to seek out more from it, doesn't that defeat the whole point? As I said way back at the start of this video, we as a community thrive off of each other. Theories like Papyrus is the Knight, or T-Theory, or Ralsei is a bad guy were only made popular through a group effort. Silly headcanons like Spamton Pets and Ralsei smoking a bint were so prevalent that they ended up being referenced in extra canonical content. Hell, Spamton and Jevil are canonically divorced now. AUs like Prunsel were seen by the fandom precisely because people liked them enough to share them around and originated from their own dreams. You've had 13 years of opportunity to know about this song already, and 7 of being able to listen to the most complete version of it to date, all to yourself. And if the simple act of me sharing the information in this video of a song that you could have found theories for, covers, sheet music, and so much more just by using the right keywords, makes it lesser for you in some way with just the potential of it becoming popular with Deltarune fans, then I'm genuinely very sorry for you. And I hope you can learn to better separate your enjoyment from a piece of media, from art, by its popularity. Because you should never think that something becoming popular would ruin it. And so, in the spirit of communication, allow me to open that door just that bit more. If you want to get into Homestuck right now in the year 2024, you have the options of an entire comic with or without author commentary, 2 fully completed visual novels, and 2 acts of a point-and-click adventure game already waiting for you, with a 3rd on the way if you're just interested in pursuing Homestuck in its most straightforward canon lens. You could also look into Nemco High, which is an interesting project all on its own that we have absolutely no time for to discuss. And then you can get into the deliciously messy territory of post-canon with the epilogues, which are, in the most simple manner I can describe them, art that is designed to hurt you. But to be short about it, Homestuck Squared, the follow-up to the epilogue story, was already plagued with controversy. It had beautiful art direction, but struggled to tell a cohesive narrative, to the point where the writing team was scattered to the wind and was put on what seemed to be a permanent hiatus. Until it was announced on October 8th of last year that Homestuck Squared, now hailing an entirely new name, staff, and writing team, was going to be revived and renamed Beyond Canon. They have killed it with a consistent schedule, panels that have ranged from gorgeous to breathtaking, and a loving but unflinching depiction of the characters that simultaneously understands who they are without compromising on how they were depicted in earlier portions of post-canon. It is the best of both worlds. Jake English has been completely turned around in only 11 pages. There is an epic lesbian divorce arc going on. Solix was reintroduced in one of the first updates that they ever did. They had the balls to kill off one of my favorite characters in the entire series in a way that somehow reinforces and yet completely recontextualizes his existence in the original comic. We had an official Karkat plushie only a few months after it seemed like we were never going to get any merch for the series ever again. Crimson Ruse, a corporate VTuber, and Mayoshi, was able to do an incredibly earnest stream on Homestuck Day and had the current director of Homestuck as a special guest on his 612 stream. It is notoriously difficult for corporate VTubers to get stream permissions of internet content, and the man who claimed on his debut stream that Homestuck is his favorite isekai has now been directly acknowledged in the news section of the comic itself twice. Something of even this magnitude happening for Homestuck would be unheard of even just last summer. The year is 2024, and I want to shout this until heaven itself cracks open like an egg under the sheer force of my sincerity. Not only is Homestuck good again, but it always has been. But even with all this aside, one of the reasons I really wanted to see this project to completion was the hope that this video would inspire more Deltarune fans to, at the very least, listen to more Homestuck music. Black was and still is, to this day, one of the best songs Toby has ever composed. It has been over half a decade since I first watched Jack Ascend. Just getting to the opening still makes my entire body seize up, and hearing the ending ruins me every time. Clownfucker, which was composed by both Toby Fox and James Roach, is one of my favorite extended material parts of Friend Sim, and arguably the entire series. It is one of the most perfect tracks to accompany one of the best characters in the entirety of Homestuck. I am sure I've found a way to sneak Darling Kanaya somewhere into this video already, as well as its sister song, Darling Dolorosa. And who could forget the absolute banger that is Vriska's theme? That's not to mention the massive library of songs in Homestuck that were composed by other people. Michael Guy Bowman, Clark Powell, Malcolm Brown, Jamie Page, Tensei, James Roach, Bazinkai, and many, many others. There was that whole debacle with Bill Bolin. Potential Verdancy is the perfect song to lay on the ground and chill out to, especially if you have a decent pair of headphones on hand. Air of Grief has never failed to rock my world. You owe it to yourself to listen to Unite Synchronization by Malcolm Brown as soon as this video is over. Or better yet, watch the entire Flash page. And I have never met a single person who doesn't like Super Ego by Yan Bucleos Rodriguez. Get out there and listen. There's a whole world waiting for you. Claim 5. Who gives a shit? Have you not been listening to the video? Me. I give a shit. Learn your roots.
This video is the biggest load of hoo-ha I've ever seen. Why do you insist we watch this stupid thing?
Am I the only one who understands the complexities of this ambitious
Auditory
masterpiece? This
song
isn't stupid! You're stupid!
Kidding. Mostly. My real answer comes down to this. Penumbra Phantasm is a blueprint for a lot of Toby's music. Not specifically because of the main Penumbra lane motifs, though they are present in specific songs, but because a lot of his later work feature or were influenced by parts of this song specifically, many of which ended up as lane motifs in their own right. It is an extremely important part of not only Homestuck history, but of Undertale and Deltarune. And so many people ignore that history because Homestuck is seen as this cringe property. But I'll remind you this. This is the Undertale and Deltarune fandom. Don't act like we didn't used to be just as cringe back in the day. Our fandoms are cousins. We are far more intertwined than you think. And family is meant to pick each other up, not tear each other down. A lot of people have theories and wishes about the future of this series, and I know I've already contributed to some of them, but I personally think that we've been so caught up in the what-ifs of faraway chapters that we've forgotten to take a moment to sit back and reflect on our past. There's a very simple reason why I don't see Penumbra Phantasm talked about in the fandom, and I can sum it up in one word: visibility. These songs didn't come out of nowhere. They didn't hatch out of Toby Fox's brain like an egg or spring out fully formed. No, Toby has been working his ass off on just the potential of these games alone for over 13 years. If this project has shown me anything, it's a reinforced appreciation of how you can use music to tell a story and the effort that goes into creating it. I have mixed emotions about this project. On the one hand, it's been thrilling to get into something that, for our community, has been relatively uncharted waters. I've never been great at music theory, and it's genuinely been a lot of fun to learn something that has little to do with my chosen field. But it's not like I've made some completely new discovery here. Hell, I'm just a guy who was in the right place at the right time. This was a massive research rabbit hole that, as of the time of writing, I've sunk more than a year of my life into. But at the time of reading this, The 2-year anniversary of me starting to work on this video will be coming up in the middle of January in 2025. I want to get off of Mr. Fox's Wild Ride.
Are you gonna be okay? No!
If I wasn't already into Homestuck before stumbling head over heels into Penumbra, would I have hoped further? Would I have even cared? I hope so. Making this video wasn't just for my own sake, though the thrill of doing my own research has and always will launch me into months-long projects for years to come. This was for the sake of the community. You see, I sometimes think about a future where everything is exactly the same. A hypothetical future where Penumbra Phantasm finally drops in like 2028 and the larger community's collective thought is that it's just a cool boss fight song or what have you with callbacks to the rest of the series. Everyone moves on and the only players who know what's happening are people like me. Someone who came across the right song at the right time. I think that's a pretty sad future. I think people deserve the chance to know about and appreciate Penumbra Phantasm as it is already, like it deserves. If you've made it to this point in the video, then maybe you do now too. It's been waiting long enough. Quod erat demonstrandum. And while we wind down this monster of a video, I'd like to talk about some of the background nature of making this, as well as direct you towards some of my sources. I'm certainly not the first person to talk about Penumbra on the internet, but I definitely am the person that created the most comprehensive video documentation of it. Most of my research was either difficult to find unless you know how to navigate some pretty ancient parts of Homestuck Tumblr, and to be fair, now pretty ancient parts of Undertale Tumblr, or they were kind of thrown onto Reddit as a sort of hear me out theory page. This whole thing was more of an exercise of finding all of these unconnected puzzle pieces and putting them into place. I remember when I first came across Penumbra as a song itself, the thing that instantly captivated me about it was just how familiar it sounded. And a large part of the fun of starting to really fall in love with and appreciate this song was walking myself through all of the steps of why this was so important and influential to a series that I loved.
I hope I was able to replicate that experience for you, even if your journey was a fraction compared to mine.
There was a long worry that I had while making this that I was messing up in some way by breaking everything down, and I deliberated a lot about how to structure everything, especially the music section. That's honestly why it took this video so long to make. I landed on erring on the side of caution by perhaps over-explaining things, but while I was still ideating, I was assured by my friends Davey and Robin that being over-explanatory was definitely better than just plopping things down and leaving it. I do hope you'll forgive me if I ever veered into rambling territory at any point. And now, speaking of veering into rambling territory, let's veer into rambling territory. Let's talk about the ethical concerns of even making this damn video. The thing is that when I was first getting into the nature of this, it was always a big question in my mind of why this was just a thing that people didn't talk about. And I think maybe not the most major reason, but possibly a factor was that the way in which this knowledge was initially obtained is questionable. And I think that it's important to discuss these kinds of things. So back in the dark ages when we didn't have this full piano version of Penumbra Phantasm that I'm sure you may or may not see in the recommended section of this video, the methods that we had at our disposal to be able to share the song were small because we only had small portions. There was a live version that Toby Fox played on an actual piano in front of a group of people at a Homestuck event that I believe somebody recorded partially, and for a long time that was generally the most widely available version of Penumbra that we had.
So information on it was pretty sparse. And then when things were really up and running and kicking off with the Homestuck sound test, I believe there were a couple of members that I'm going to talk about this carefully. So a couple of the contributors of the Homestuck sound test were poking around on some old forums that Toby Fox used to frequent, and they did find a MIDI version of Penumbra Phantasm, but alongside that found what I believe to be is the most agreed upon term, let's just say personal information of Toby Fox's that he probably would have preferred to stay off the internet. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Please don't go around looking for it. I'm fairly sure he's probably scrubbed it off the internet at this point. But they unearthed this information and immediately sent it to the Cool and New music team to put into the Homestuck sound test, because as we've discussed, Penumbra Phantasm is a Homestuck song. So basically Toby Fox catches wind of this and goes, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I would like you to take out this, and this, and I would like you to rename this because I don't agree with the language that I used here anymore. I would like you to put a disclaimer on this, and I will allow you to keep Penumbra Phantasm on the Homestuck sound test if you agree to delete the actual MIDI file and upload it as a MP3. I'm sure for a variety of reasons, mostly because it's a lot easier to poke around in a MIDI than it is an MP3, but it seems that the members of the Homestuck sound test agreed to this because you can basically see in a changelog that this discussion had taken place, and we don't have that MIDI file of Penumbra Phantasm anymore. And believe me, I looked because I was curious as to why it was referenced and to find it anywhere, and that's how I found out about the nature of why we even ended up having this version of Penumbra in the first place. So once I ended up cobbling all that information together, I had a choice to make, because it seems that one of the agreed upon things in at least the Homestuck fandom is that Toby had asked people not to discuss or share certain bits of information, including that Penumbra Phantasm MIDI. Now, I don't have the MIDI. I don't think anybody does. And if you do, you probably shouldn't. But it just feels a bit uncomfortable not to discuss these kinds of things and try to heed those wishes as much as possible, even if they were made back in 2017, which is now 7 years ago? 7 years ago. So even though I didn't really consult this with anyone, mostly because all the people that I reached out to never got back to me, my personal stipulations for releasing the video is thus. I will not be sharing the full version of Penumbra Phantasm that I have, and I will not be putting a link to it in the description. If you're really that curious, you can find it yourself, mostly just because I want to try to respect the wish of not sharing that file in full as much as I possibly can. And the other bit is that, and this is addressed to Toby Fox personally, hi, if you do not want this video to stay up on the internet, please reach out to me on my personal Tumblr. I really respect you and your work, and I want to try to continue to remain as respectful to your wishes as possible. Thank you for making Undertale and Deltarune. I don't really know what the conclusion to this is other than let's not poke around at other people's personal information on the internet, maybe, and I guess a general reminder to young people out on the internet. Please remember that personal information, if released on public forums, is not going to be personal anymore. And if you can remember to keep private details private, it will make your life a lot easier in the future as an adult. Please stay safe on the internet. Anyways, back to the video. Another thing I'd like to bring up is that I'm not entirely sure when this version of Penumbra was written, but My best guess is somewhere a little bit after 2012 based on word of mouth and some context clues. I personally reached out to Tumblr user Sanctifarium, who was in charge of maintaining the Homestuck sound test back in 2017 to see if they could point me in a better direction. Or better yet, have a chat about what it was like to be involved in unearthing the most complete version of Penumbra we have to date, but at this point in time I haven't gotten a response. I think even if this version of Penumbra was written during the time that Undertale was being seriously worked on, that doesn't necessarily negate anything spoken about in this video, but I still wanted to be transparent as possible about it. If you'd like to get even more in-depth than what I've been able to discuss in this video, I'd like to point you towards YouTube user DoDove, who's archived a lot of information about Penumbra Phantasm, and to this Reddit post by user/fanboy8947. Both are a massive help to cross-reference during the early stages of this video, and I'll link to both of them in the description. Also, I'm more than due for giving a massive thank you to the Homestuck Archives. It would have been quite the difficult undertaking to confirm some of the information in this video without your diligence. I've also included a link in the description for this video of a master comparison compilation on my second channel in case you want to have an easier re-listen to the music section. And if you're still listening at this point, hi! This video has taken a very, very long time to make, and a lot of things have changed in the span of when I was first thinking about it to when I started writing about it to when I started really properly documenting everything going on here. I knew that this video was special and it deserved a lot of time to be able to put into it. Time that was a little scary to dedicate to something when I have such a small channel, given that this is not only a very serious video for me to make, but also to date the longest I've ever made. But there was just something about this one that really sparked my passion for writing essays in general and video editing again. I plan on releasing some sort of follow-up video either here or on my second channel after gauging the reception of this one, so look forward to that one coming out very soon. If you really liked this video, the best thing that you can do for me is to share it on social media, share it with your friends, talk about it in the comments below. I'm sure I've probably missed some sort of smoking gun on why You Know What This Is secretly the linchpin to this entire operation. I'm also happy to announce that I have a Patreon, as well as several long-term projects that have an even larger scope than this one, that I am very, very excited to be able to share with you. Maybe in 25, hopefully. I'm still at the stage right now where this kind of thing is best considered a very time-consuming hobby, but if you'd like to see more videos from me with a scale similar to this or larger, where I talk about the artistic intentions of things that arguably were not created to be able to be examined in that way, it'd be a lot easier to incentivize making them if I had some financial support, but no pressure either way. If you're still here, I appreciate you so much. Watching the entirety of this monster of a video through means more to me than you could ever know. Have a nice day, and you can take the Deltarune out of Homestuck, but you can't take the Homestuck out of Deltarune.
That's it. Bye.